Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar titled Minting and Selling an NFT, Live Demo and Legal Analysis. Before we get started on today's presentation, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. Today's presentation is being recorded for post-event viewing. If you have any questions for our presenters today at any point during the live demo, please type your questions into the meeting chat feature. We will do our best to cover all of your questions at the end of the presentation, time permitting. If you experience any technical issues, please refresh your browser or leave the meeting and join back in. If you continue to have issues, please contact Foley's tech team at videoconferencing@foley.com or dial 1-866-319-5800 extension 2. And now I will turn it over to John Israel.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is John Israel. I'm a partner in Foley Lardner's New York City office, one of 21 Foley offices across the US, 24 globally. We have about 1,200 attorneys practicing in a broad range of disciplines that you would expect to find in a general service law firm of that size. And the firm itself has distinguished itself in many ways, including around client service. And you can certainly find a lot of info about the firm itself at our website, foley.com. I am also the co-chair of the firm's Sports and Entertainment Group, which is a multidisciplinary team of attorneys with significant experience in the sports and entertainment industry, with several of us having spent time as in-house counsel at various professional sports organizations and entertainment companies. We like to say, as outside lawyers, we bring a unique insider's perspective to the work we do for clients in this space. I spent about 8 years as an in-house lawyer at the NBA, and our industry team began watching closely the launch and growth and publicity surrounding NBA Top Shot, the blockchain-based platform that allows fans and collectors to buy, sell, and trade limited edition NBA licensed video moments as NFTs. And of course, NFTs are not limited to sports memorabilia, but can be used to sell and trade unique, intangible, and tangible items, including virtual sneakers and digital art and music. And the NFT possibilities do seem endless and seem to be becoming more and more mainstream. And we've seen Coca-Cola with its recent NFT drops, and I think just last week Visa acquired a CryptoPunk NFT. So the other thing I think we see is that the NFT phenomenon is also moving blockchain technology and cryptocurrency more into the mainstream. But no matter how and in what ways NFTs involve, they are certainly gaining traction as serious money and investment are flooding into the space. And as the business grows, so do legal issues. And as we began working on NFT-related projects, it became clear that our attorneys were addressing a range of legal and business matters involved in NFTs, cutting across a significant cross-section of legal disciplines, from technology and data privacy, patents, platforms, crypto, blockchain, smart contracts, investment transactions, property rights, ownership, trademark, copyright, and securities regulations. The list seems endless. And there really are many diverse legal risks lurking here, and they can be tricky in such a new area where the technology as such doesn't always fit into legal rules that have been around for quite a long time. Fortunately, at Foley, we have a breadth of experience and knowledge to cover that range of issues, which prompted us to form the Foley NFT Task Force. We truly are a one-stop shop for NFT-related needs. We meet regularly, we support one another on projects, analyze the latest developments, and we're publishing articles and doing podcasts and seminars like this one. And you can learn more about the NFT Task Force if you just visit our NFT Task Force page at foley.com, and maybe we can throw a link up there in the chat box. Today's program is a brainchild of that same NFT Task Force, and it was inspired in part by the other programs that we have put on a few months back, which provided a general overview on NFTs and featured some insights from a great group of guests, and we got a lot of good feedback on those programs, which actually asked us to dial up the legal just a little bit. And that, of course, makes sense, I think, given that so much is new about NFTs and people are really wondering what the legal issues are and how they might be addressed as they enter into the NFT world. But we also realize that to really understand and be able to identify those legal risks involved with NFTs, it helps to see or put them in a practical context. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to examine the entire life cycle of an NFT and consider the legal issues generated at every step along the way. Today, unlike our last programs, we have no special guests, but we do have a new star for this program, our very own Foley Lardner NFT, which makes us one of the first AmLaw 50 law firms to mint and sell an NFT. I know you're probably all scrambling to figure out how you might acquire such a unique asset, but as my colleagues are going to tell you, the first Foley NFT is not for sale in a public auction. Could the Foley logo, 2 blue blocks NFT have reached the atmospheric price peaks of a LeBron James moment or a CryptoPunk alien? Alas, we will never know. Though I'm hearing that fights are breaking out over which of our offices might put the NFT on display. But look, at a minimum, the Foley NFT has allowed our group a bit of fun while we hone in on the key legal issues in the minting and sales process. And we think today's program offers something for everyone. Hopefully, we can help demystify the NFT world for those new to the arena while highlighting the legal issues for everyone, including those with NFT experience or familiarity. There's much to cover, so I'm going to step aside for the demo and launch of the Foley Lardner NFT, which will be led by my colleagues Andy Lee and Catherine Zhu, who masterminded the creation of the NFT and the content for today's program. They're going to take us step by step through the NFT process and help us identify the various legal issues along the way. Just as a quick intro, Andy's a former GC of the New York Jets and a current member of the Foley Lardner Sports and Entertainment Group, who works from our New York City office. And Andy has worked on a variety of NFT-related matters in the sports and entertainment space. And Catherine's based out in Silicon Valley. She's a seasoned business, commercial, and privacy lawyer who's focused on commercial agreements, transactions, data sharing, and privacy. She too has experience with NFT projects, including recently working with the Milwaukee Bucks and its NFT memorabilia drop, as well as certain other confidential and ongoing NFT projects in the works. They're going to be talking legal issues with the other task force members, Byron McLean, Louis Laho, Laura Ganoza, Eric Sophir, and Pat Doherty. Without further ado, let's turn it over to Andy and Catherine. Take it away.
Thanks, John. I will get first, before we do the big reveal of the Foley NFT. We're going to be, this is basically the process we're going to be walking through today. We're going to show you the actual minting of the NFT and how that is accomplished using the OpenSea platform. There are a variety of platforms out there where you can do this type of thing, and you can also, if you're very technical, you can do it yourself from a coding perspective. But we're going to use OpenSea, which is one of the most popular and user-friendly platforms. We'll talk a little bit about the smart contracts that basically are the DNA of an NFT. Talk about editing the NFT, and then we're going to walk through the process of actually selling it, transferring it on the blockchain, and also a secondary sale from that first purchaser to a second purchaser, to illustrate things like the royalty chargeback and different aspects of the NFTs. So without further ado, this is the artwork that we created, which I've just shared in my window for the creation of the Foley NFT. So most NFTs, as you're probably aware these days, that you hear about in the news, have involved art, graphics, music, things like that. There are a number of issues to keep in mind before you actually go into the process of using artwork like this or anything else and incorporating it into an NFT. You've got a variety of intellectual property type things to think of and to cover. So it may not seem like much, but even just a graphic like this involves several different items of intellectual property. You've got the Foley and Lardner name and logo, which someone at some point, designed and created. You've got the actual file that includes the animation of this particular file. If this was an NFT that included music, you would have music as well. And there are other things that can be incorporated. So you have to consider before you go to the process of getting out there in the world and selling one or more significantly a series of NFTs. If you don't have all the rights cleared, you could end up with claims that could end up being significant. So some of the main things to think about, obviously, copyright is a primary concern here. You need to make sure that you have the rights to incorporate whatever intellectual property you're incorporating into the NFT. So that could be done by virtue of being the creator of the graphics or the art or whatever it is that's being incorporated, or if you're a company or an employer, you could have it being created by one of your employees within the scope of their employment, which would make it a work for hire under the copyright law, in which case the employer actually owns it from inception. And there are important distinctions in how you obtain copyright ownership. You could also have a license to use the property, which typically would be something in writing between yourself and the creator, and that would include the terms of the license, including whether or not you're paying for the right to use it in your NFT. Another way to obtain copyright might be by assignment of the copyright. So once if the creator, in this case maybe a graphic artist, if they assign the copyright in the art to you, you would own it. But it's important to keep in mind that contrary to a work for hire, an assignment could be is subject to termination under the copyright law. The Copyright Act does provide creators the right to terminate a transfer of ownership 35 years later. That might seem very remote right now, but we've seen that come up in connection with music outside of the context of NFTs, and with some of these NFTs and the value of the collectibles. If the trend continues, which we believe it will, that is something that could actually be an issue down the road. So another way to obtain initial ownership as a work for hire, if it's not your employee, right, would be to have an actual work for hire agreement with the creator of the artwork. And if it satisfies the definitions under the Copyright Act, then it would be a work for hire, which you would own from inception and would not be subject to that kind of termination right. Other issues to consider here are trademark rights. This particular NFT includes the trademark of Foley. So you might have another NFT that includes the trademarks of some other company, or maybe even incidentally, someone, drinking a can of Coke or something. And you have to be aware of clearing all of those types of rights. You might have a way to do that under fair use, like, Andy Warhol's Campbell Soup paintings, but I'm not aware of that actually being tested in the context of NFTs, where the art is only one portion of what's going on. So you have to be aware of trademark issues. Another area to be careful of is if you're using pictures or video of actual people, you could implicate their rights of publicity, and you would want to make sure that you have the right to feature them in your NFT. Again, all of these are things, particularly if your NFT is successful, you may end up hearing from these people later on and getting claims from them for violation of their intellectual property rights. There are some specific issues that relate to the use of music in NFTs, which I'm actually going to ask our partner Laura Ganoza to talk about for a minute here. Laura, over to you. I'll take a crack at it, Laura, because some of this is stuff that Laura and I have worked on together in the music space. The copyright interests in music do include particular issues there, because there's different parts of the copyright that are all part of that relate to the music. So you have the rights in the composition, and then separate rights in a particular recording of that song. So if you're going to use an iteration of a song as a recording in an NFT, you have to think about not only who owns that recording, but who owns the underlying composition rights, basically who were the writers of that song. And if you don't have the right documentation or cover off with those writers and or the recording artists or the performers on the song, if you don't have all of that buttoned up, you could end up facing, again, it will tend to happen more if your NFT is successful and you're making a lot of money. Nothing tends to bring claims out of the woodwork like success. So you could end up having to deal with those issues after the fact. And then you have to struggle with issues like how much of the value of the NFT is attributable to the composition or the writing of the song, how much of it is attributable to the recording of the song, how much is attributable to the actual artwork in the song, and how much of it is attributable to the notoriety and the personality of the creator or the person who is actually selling the NFT. So there are some very specific issues to think about there from the perspective of the artwork in these NFTs. There are some other issues relating to functionality that I'm going to ask our partner Eric Sofer to comment on for a minute before we move on.
Thanks, Andy. So Andy was just talking about certain IP rights, but we should also consider patent rights. Patent clearance, we also call it freedom to operate analysis, is where we search for patents that are out there and assess the risk of if we were to release this product, if we were to make this product, would we have a risk of infringing someone else's patent? One of the interesting things here is NFTs are relatively new. They've really ramped up this year. They've been in existence, beyond earlier than 2021. But patent applications published after 18 months, usually there's some exceptions, and patents published the day of grant. But that patenting process could take a year, 2 years, could take 5 years. So we're not really likely to see innovations from 2021 yet as far as patented ideas. So there might be some value to doing a search, but in the next few months, it's going to be challenging to really see the rights that people are pursuing and what might be enforceable. We're going to see some older innovations, but they're probably not going to use the terms like non-fungible token. Maybe they call it a cryptographic token or some sort of blockchain token. And so we really need to understand what it is that we're searching for, so that we understand the type of terminology put in a Boolean search here, so we could find relevant prior art amidst the mass of blockchain innovation out there. Now, if you're minting an NFT that points to some artwork or music, and you don't really have additional functionality, there's probably not a lot of substantial concern, excuse me, for patent rights. But it is worth mentioning that patent protection using design patents is available for ornamental features, including things like how something's displayed on a screen, or even how an image might transition on a screen. And we saw in the Foley NFT how it moves, and that could potentially be protectable. So if there are new features, new functionality, might be worth exploring whether this analysis would be useful to assess risk of your own NFT or your own platform. Andy?
Thanks, Eric. So we're going to move right into the process here of creating the NFT. So as you can see here, I'm going to start by heading over to the OpenSea website, which is OpenSea.io. As I said before, it's a platform with a user-friendly interface. As you'll see here, it includes featured NFTs, something not so much unlike other platforms that you might see content distributed on, whether it's even things like Spotify or YouTube, right? You're going to be presented with things as you open up. This is part of the utility of OpenSea, of bringing creators and consumers together. They show some exclusive OpenSea drops here, so you can see some of the types of things, here, crypto pills, these characters, or you have crypto native. These are, as it says here, artificial intelligence generated art that evolves on the secondary market. So presumably things that change as they live. So just a little bit of an illustration of some of the different types of things you might see as you're looking for NFTs. OpenSea also has a variety of categories, and they feature some of the things that are trending in these different categories of NFTs. It also, along with the idea of being user friendly, you can see here they have a show you an easy way to get to tutorials and things that basically are going to, this type of thing that talks about exactly what we're doing today, setting up your wallet for cryptocurrency, creating your collection of NFTs, adding your NFTs, and then finally listing them for sale. They have a variety of other resources here to use as well. Like I said, there are other platforms you can use, but OpenSea is probably the most popular now. It runs on the Ethereum blockchain network. Some of the categories, the ones we're all familiar with, art, music, but there's also NFTs consisting of domain names, virtual items, and utility tokens, things that you might buy a virtual item that you could use in a virtual game, for example, or in some online multiplayer game. I think of the movie Ready Player One, which I recently rewatched, which was a futuristic society where most of society was interacting with each other in a virtual world, putting on their goggles and these VR suits, and they might have things that they, special sort of tokens that they bought that don't exist in the real world, but they can use in the virtual reality world. That's kind of a futuristic look at something that NFTs might become, much in the way that, when some of us were kids, we saw Star Trek with basically flip phones and things that look like what iPhones might be today. So as we started, before this started, I had already logged into my OpenSea account, which, you can see everyone has their own OpenSea account. You log in using your own crypto wallet. Right here, you can see that my wallet has its own specific address. This is a cryptographic hash, an address that points only to my wallet, and that is what interacts with the blockchain. This is where you obtain and get your funds, cryptocurrency. Ethereum, OpenSea is based mostly on the Ethereum cryptocurrency, and you would buy it. You buy it, it's stored in your wallet. The common one that I'm using is called MetaMask, but there are other ones as well. And that's where you get your cryptocurrency, and you hold it like you hold regular money in your wallet, but it's not real world paper money. It's cryptocurrency, which I'm going to ask our partner Pat Dougherty to talk a little bit about at this point. Pat?
Yeah, thanks very much. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
So NFTs are a use of blockchain tech, which has diverse applications. It's used commercially, for example, in supply chain management, artistically, as we're seeing today in this demonstration, and also significantly in payment systems. The cryptographic tokens that are fungible can be a kind of money that is recorded in blocks on particular blockchains. Bitcoin being the first and most prominent of these, invented about 11 years ago by Satoshi Nakamoto. If you ever run into Satoshi, him, her, or them, please give them my regards and admiration. No one has ever met Satoshi, I think. About 4 years later, Vitalik Buterin and a group of developers around him invented Ether, which runs on Ethereum. They invented that too. There are literally thousands of crypto tokens that are used as payment and are part of payment systems. For example, with my colleagues at Foley about 2 years ago, we helped launch the AVAX token, which runs on Avalanche, the Avalanche blockchain. We think that's a big deal. Why would lawyers get involved at all? Well, as John Israel told you at the top, there are a host of legal issues here with respect to crypto tokens in particular. the SEC, the CFTC, the US Treasury all have points of view and policies that may or may not apply in different ways. State law, foreign law, a host of these items, many of which will be explored by my partners on the show. I hope you're enjoying it. To the point, though, these crypto tokens are held in wallets, which you don't carry on your person, but are software. MetaMask being a very common one, can be downloaded from the internet. I can't remember what I paid for it. I think it's free. And that is how crypto tokens are stored. With that explanation, I'll pass to Catherine, who can talk about NFT creation out in Silicon Valley. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Pat. Andy, why don't I let you do the NFT creation first, and then we can talk about the legal considerations.
Sounds good. Sounds good. We're back to my screen here. Going along, expanding on what Pat was just talking about. Something we were talking before about the different categories of NFTs. We do envision, and I think some of this we've seen already, but we do envision NFTs representing ownership in real world objects, and you can envision a part. It may even be happening already, but where NFTs take the place of things like real estate title and title insurance, ways of confirming ownership of actual real world assets. I know some of the auction houses have already done this with respect to sales of art, of collections of art, or unique pieces of art. So there are some real world applications that we think we are going to start seeing, and as more and more funding comes into the NFT space, that's going to enable, whether it's venture capital funding, private equity, it's going to enable a lot more innovation, which will start to accelerate the pace of development of those types of things. But going back to OpenSea, we get here to a page on OpenSea. The way you create your NFTs, you keep them in collections. So I've already created a collection here. It's basically my storefront for this particular type or set of NFTs, and you can have multiple NFTs, multiple editions of an NFT, all listed in one collection. So right here, this collection is empty, as you can see, because I haven't added anything to it yet. We just click on Add Item, and it takes us to a very easy to use interface here. You basically just drop and drag or upload the file into this page, and then you're going to start filling out a series of prompts that OpenSea has created that basically populate the metadata of the smart contract. Now, really, truly technical people in the NFT space are doing this type of thing on their own. They're literally coding their own contracts. But the beauty of OpenSea and platforms like it is it makes it easier for anyone to get into this space and create the NFTs without having to actually dig into the nuts and bolts of coding. So as we do it, we're giving the NFT a name. Again, this will get baked into the metadata of the smart contract. OpenSea very conveniently gives us an external link where we can share, or we can create a link, or it will give us a link. Then we get into the description of the NFT. This is a pretty important part from a legal perspective, because you're not only describing here what your NFT is, but this is the part of the NFT that is the most consumer facing. And from the perspective of the inevitable litigation that is going to come out of these things more and more, this is where you're basically communicating to the world what you're selling, but also more importantly, what you're not selling. It's important for your description here to be accurate and to comply with what the NFT actually is or actually does. You could envision breach of contract claims, securities law claims, which our partners Byron and Louis are going to talk about in a few minutes, but also things like consumer fraud claims on a class action basis. Anytime we have something in the world that is successfully sold items on a broad scale. There are plaintiffs' lawyers out there looking for ways to bring class action claims under what often involve consumer fraud statutes of various states. So you can protect yourself in many ways against those types of claims by being exceedingly clear in these descriptions, because once the NFT is created and put out onto the blockchain, everything in this description becomes locked as part of the metadata. In this case, we've also included important disclaimers and restrictions about the intellectual property that's included in this particular NFT. Things like, you're not, as we talked about earlier, buying the NFT does not transfer the underlying copyright to the artwork. Buying the NFT does not transfer or does not give you any rights to use the trademark in any particular way. It's basically you're buying it for your own personal enjoyment, and you can use it and display it for non-commercial purposes. So there could be other types of limitations that you might want to state in here, and also describe other things that are part of your NFT, like off-chain assets. If owning this NFT gives you rights to, I don't know, things like concert tickets or other things like that, you want to be clear about it here so that you always have something English, right, and legible, something that is not computer code based, to point back to and easily say, this is what you bought and you knew what you were buying. It's also important to make sure that that description actually corresponds with what the smart contract is actually designed to do. In the case of OpenSea, they make that pretty easy because it's a standard contract. So moving down, there are some other aspects here of the NFT. You can choose which collection in your profile you're going to put into it. There are properties that you can add. Often in the case of things like CryptoPunks or racehorses, these might include things like, is it male or female? You could say it has a personality that is happy or sad. You could describe the color. All of these types of things that become part of the NFT, which can be useful in terms of users searching for different types of NFTs. If someone is looking for NFTs to use in connection with a particular online game or something, they might need it to have certain qualities. So this is where you put in those types of things. There are levels, similar thing. They're properties. It could be like the speed of a particular racehorse that you're minting into this NFT, because believe it or not, there are websites and entire worlds out there for breeding and racing and betting on virtual racehorses that essentially consist of NFTs. There are stud farms where you can put your NFT racehorses together and breed a new racehorse, and all of these types of qualities. The properties that you put into this NFT would, in those examples, become basically the DNA of the horse. So all these types of properties, if you have more than one edition of an NFT, you would state it here. You might also include unlockable content, which only becomes, as it says here, can only be revealed by the owner of the item. Now, that could include things like I said before, concert tickets, or it could include a link to a higher resolution file of the artwork that is part of the NFT. But you have to be careful here from a legal perspective. Make sure it's something that you can and you do deliver. Make sure you've described it clearly in your description, because if your description says the unlockable content includes one thing and what you actually deliver is something else, someone paid a lot of money for it, that's the type of thing that you could end up finding yourself on the receiving end of a lawsuit. It's particularly true if this is a large-scale NFT issuance with multiple editions and multiple potential plaintiffs or class members. Also, importantly, if you're going to get into unlockable content, if it's content that you don't describe clearly, or if it's something where the buyer doesn't know, or what the content is going to be randomly assigned, some of it might be more valuable than others, you could end up tripping over state gambling and lottery laws too. So you have to be careful that you're not basically turning your NFT into a virtual scratch-off card where someone's buying it and they don't know what they're getting, but they might end up getting something valuable at that point. OpenSea also, allows you to specify if there's any objectionable content here to keep it clean, so to speak, and that helps to protect against issues that might arise under the Child Online Protection Act and pornography laws. Right now, OpenSea uses the Ethereum blockchain, as I said, for the most part. That's where all of this NFT magic happens. Now, the metadata, as I said before, everything we entered on this page eventually becomes part of the metadata of the NFT. Once you've created it, you do have the opportunity to freeze that metadata, but before you do that, and I'll show you this after, you can edit it. So once it's frozen, that's it. It's on the blockchain, and it's basically minted in there. The way the blockchain works is basically the Ethereum blockchain, like all blockchains, it's just distributed ledger technology. So technically, it's a consensus of replicated and synchronized data that is spread geographically across multiple nodes all over the place, actual computers everywhere. So when a node wants a transaction in the blockchain, it sends it to its peer nodes, which then send it to their peer nodes, and so on and so on and so on. You think of that commercial from when we were younger. I don't remember what it was for, but she told two friends, and she told two friends, and he told two friends, etc. And basically, that's how the blockchain gets populated. Blockchain miners use lists of new transactions to create new blocks, which they then send to the rest of the network. And once the consensus is reached that the transactions on the block are accurate, that block becomes part of the blockchain. A next block would end up being in front of it in the chain, and once that happens, everything on that block is permanent and can't be changed at that point. So that's part of the importance of freezing the metadata. So we're going to go ahead and create the NFT. Now, what's happening here as we wait is the creation of the NFT has been sent out onto the blockchain, and the nodes are actually doing the work that I just discussed, right? So sometimes it takes a little while. One other thing to note, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, is the concept of gas. When you're on OpenSea, the first time that you create an NFT, there will be a transaction fee, which is called gas. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But because I've done this before, it didn't charge me any gas at this point. So we end up waiting a few minutes while the transaction is confirmed. There you go. We've now created the Foley Lardner NFT. OpenSea gives you the ability to share this easily to Twitter, Facebook, by email. You can also have a link. This is important because you're now going to be talking about your promotion and your marketing. And that's another area for legal liability. Just like when you're promoting or marketing anything, you're going to want to make sure that you're complying with advertising restrictions and not tripping over any of those consumer fraud claims, so that what you advertise and how you promote the NFT needs to accurately represent what it actually is and what it does. Otherwise, you'll find yourself on the end of those same types of claims we talked about before. So we've now got our NFT created. Catherine, do you want to talk a little bit about the terms of service for using OpenSea and MetaMask at this point?
Yeah, thank you, Andy. As you can see through the process that Andy just walked us through, it's very easy to go through the minting and the listing of the NFT without ever seeing what terms you're agreeing to and what legal framework applies to the whole transaction. But there are governing legal terms that do apply, and it's important to be aware of what these are. And typically, what we'll see is NFT marketplace terms of service. In this case, the marketplace that we're operating on is OpenSea, so it would be OpenSea's terms of service that would apply. And and you've also seen, right, a lot of these marketplaces are not entirely self-contained. They rely on third-party services such as MetaMask for certain functionalities. In MetaMask, an example of MetaMask, that would be the processing of those transactions and doing the payment via the wallet. So a lot of times for these NFT transactions, we'll see various sets of platform terms being applied to your actions and your transactions on that platform. And so for the OpenSea terms of service, these are very we've looked at these many times. They're very standard, NFT marketplace terms of service. There's a very high assumption of risk by the user, whether you're a buyer or seller, and there's a whole slew of use restrictions that you would need to comply with when operating on the platform. I think some important things to look out for is, a lot of NFT marketplace platforms, they may vary in their terms. A lot of them do have the same features, right? A lot of pushing a lot of the risk onto their users, imposing use restrictions. Some NFT marketplace platforms will impose terms of sale governing transactions on those marketplaces. And in other cases, the marketplace may not do so. So in the example of OpenSea, that's an example of NFT marketplace that does not have very prescriptive terms for governing the sale of an NFT. And so in those cases, if you're a seller on the platform and you're not including additional terms of sale, as Andy showed you that we had done with our NFT, then that could be a gap in the governing legal terms for the purchase of your NFT. Another variation that we've seen in NFT marketplace terms of service is around IP rights. Mostly, the default is the purchase of NFT does not represent a transfer of ownership. It usually represents a very limited license to the underlying content, and it's limited to personal, non-commercial use. But NFT marketplaces do vary on this as well. So whether you're a buyer or a seller, it's important to review what IP rights you're granting as a buyer and what IP rights you think you're getting as a seller when you're transacting on these NFT marketplaces, because they can vary. And obviously, with the MetaMask layer, you are agreeing to a whole other set of terms when you process the transaction through MetaMask. And so that'll be its own set of restrictions, its own set of liability allocations to be aware of. So, really, when you're looking at these terms of service or considering the legal framework for these NFT transactions on NFT marketplaces, it's important to review and be cognizant of the governing legal framework. And a lot of times this will be multiple sets of terms of service. And as a seller, if there are gaps in those terms of service, making sure that you fill those potentially with your own set of additional terms governing the purchase and sale of your NFT. And another last point I'll make here is, if you're using contractors to go out there, maybe design an NFT drop on OpenSea for you, or work with one of these platform providers to design an NFT program, a lot of times those contractors will be deemed your agent. So if the contractor's just they're creating an account, you likely will be deemed to have agreed to these terms as is without ever knowing it. So it's really important to be aware of what legal framework you're agreeing to, even though, the process is so digitalized and virtual that it's very easy to not be aware of, nothing's ever put under your nose, like you don't receive documents or papers. So it's very easy to go through the process without, knowing what you're agreeing to. So yeah. Andy, back to you.
Thank you. Okay, so jumping right back into the process here, as we continue, we've now created the NFT, and you can see here that now it is in my account. You can see the description that we included is actually listed there. Scrolling down, we included the description of the Foley Lardner core values. There are the properties we talked about before. And as scrolling down, you can see here that there's a history at the bottom of the NFT. So as we go through the process, you'll be able to see every transaction that's happened with this NFT, and clicking on each of the links in there will take you to a place on basically a history of the transaction on the blockchain that you can actually go and see. So right here, you'll see this, there's a contract address associated with this NFT. It starts with 0x49. It's a long series of numbers. It ends with 75BE. And we're going to see that at various points as we go through this process, which is one of the ways that that it's always the same NFT that is being dealt with on the blockchain. So if we were to click on that contract address, it will take us to a site called Etherscan, which is essentially it's kind of like Google for the blockchain, right? It's a block exploring tool. And at the top of that page, you can see the contract there, and you see it starts with OX49, it ends with 7B5E. So this is a way for us to look at the actual smart contract that is represented by this cryptographic hash on the blockchain. So if we go down a little bit to actually view the contract itself, we click on contract. It's going to take us to the actual code of this smart contract, which is, as you can see, it's basically hundreds of lines of alphanumeric characters that do not make any, sense in a human readable fashion. Lots of, nothing but just F's, numbers, letters. Okay, scroll all the way down. It's completely that. So there is a way to decompile that code and turn it into a readable, human readable format. So this shows us the same code we just looked at. We hit we're using a decompiler that is provided by Etherscan, and as you can see there, it turns it into a more human readable version of code that represents the actual smart contract. This will become, and yeah, if you look there on the second, third line, it's showing you this is the decompiled source code of the contract hash, which is exactly the same one that we were talking about before. This type of thing is going to become important in the situation where you end up in a dispute about what the terms of a particular smart contract are and whether they correspond to what you sold. This is the type of thing that an expert, like a coding expert, would show up in court to explain what the smart contract means. It also becomes important in the case of smart contracts that need to actually be validated or verified. There will be basically code audits in these transactions to verify that everything happened the way it was intended. So scrolling down, you can see even this, though, in human readable form, is not something that really means much to us in the sense of what we typically think of as a legal contract. And lots of you on the call might say, legalese, I've seen these contracts, they're 40 pages long, they're impossible to understand. Well, think about reading 1,400 lines of code that are not actually in English. So it becomes even that much more difficult. We've got 1,384 lines here. So the smart contracts, basically, as you can see, it's a piece of code programmed onto the blockchain, and it defines the terms of the transaction. In the case of this particular NFT, OpenSea essentially did it for us. We put in our description, our properties, any unlockable content, and that all feeds into the main OpenSea contract. The smart contracts, once they're on the blockchain, right, the logic of these smart contracts can never be disturbed. So there really is no room for interpretation. The input determines the output. However, there could be bugs in a contract. The contract could say or do something that's different than what the description was or what was actually marketed and sold. So there are some instances like that where we're going to, I think, in the future see litigation and or legislation about how these things are interpreted and should be used. The smart contract is basically, there can be functionality built into it. It might end up, imagine company shares, for example, shares of a corporation being tokenized. Things like shareholder voting or dividends and distributions could be accomplished directly through the NFT and through the blockchain. You might have a common example that people use when thinking of NFTs are escrow agreements, right? Where funds can be put, into the blockchain, incorporated into an NFT, and the NFT, the instructions of the smart contract are to release those funds in the form of cryptocurrency to a counterparty upon the occurrence of a certain event that is readily definable by reference to some outside. In the case of the blockchain, they're referred to as oracles. So it could be upon the delivery of a particular shipment of goods, the funds are released to the seller. So those types of things are the type of functionality that we're going to see showing up in NFTs. I think more and more. Again, right now we hear about it more from the perspective of art and music, but we're going to see more functional aspects. And some of those functional aspects may be things that make us think about patent issues, like the things that Eric was talking about before. So Eric, if you have more thoughts on patentability issues, I'm happy to pass it back over to you.
Yeah, smart contracts. I think from a patent attorney's perspective, smart contracts are a really interesting part of the functionality of NFTs. One of the challenges we face with software and business methods with patents is this patent eligibility concept. Are we merely implementing a human process on a computer? And the use of smart contracts is really interesting because we could program it to trigger something that causes a computer to automatically perform an action. It could involve payments to an artist or some other person, or it could send alerts or change a status or change ownership rights. And that really should take it out of the realm of that concern of are we just trying to protect a digital form of art or a different form of music in a different format. And so I think if you're including this functionality for smart contracts causes some sort of interesting behavior, whether you're triggering a payment or something more, it's probably worth exploring some patentability there, because there's a ton of potential that we'll tap into a bit later about the things a smart contract can provide. Andy?
Thanks, Eric. Heading back over, we're now going to, I'm going to just illustrate briefly what I talked about before in terms of actually editing the NFT, because we've created it and it exists now, but it hasn't been locked onto the blockchain yet. The metadata hasn't been frozen yet. So we actually do have an opportunity to go in and make changes. So here you can see the NFT. It's still in my account. We can click on edit, and if we wanted to, we could change the artwork. Here I'm gonna scroll down, maybe change the description a little bit, just to make it a little more legible. As you can see here, we included Foley's core values in the description. So I'm going to actually go ahead and add those as properties for Foley. Our core values consist of our people in the first instance, that we're clients first firm, professional satisfaction, stewardship and accountability, just plugging our core values here a little bit, diversity and inclusion, citizenship, trust and respect, and finally integrity. So now those properties are part of this NFT, and once the metadata is frozen, which I actually can't do quite yet because these changes still need to be submitted, but once the NFT is up on the blockchain, either through freezing the metadata or a transaction, all of those properties are permanently, those core values are now permanently part of the Foley and Lardner NFT. So again, you can see we're going to submit the changes here. And now going back to the collection page, when we see the NFT, all of those changes will be included. Let me just get to that next screen here. All right, so now scrolling down, we're going to start the process of, let me just show you again that you have those properties included in the actual NFT itself. Okay, so getting to the process of selling the NFT, basically OpenSea makes this easy for you again. You go to the sale page. There are a few different ways to list your item for sale. You could do it at a set price or at a declining price that changes over time. You can sell it auction style to the highest bidder, or you can bundle it with other items for sale. You do end up having to pay what's called a gas fee here, which we talked about before. You can see over on the right the fees. There's a 2.5% fee to OpenSea. It does mention, you can see the 10% fee to the Foley NFT Task Force. That's the royalty back to the creator, that because it's part of the metadata, it will always be part of every transaction. Interestingly, even the first one. So the part of the transaction fees, the price will be paid as purchase price, and part of it will be paid as the royalty. So in the case of this particular NFT, because we're not listing it for public sale, we're going to just kind of hold it and do it through a private offer, which we'll get to in a minute. But before we get all the way to that point, this is a good place to talk about some of the issues, the securities law issues that come up that might not apply in the case of a single NFT like the one that we're selling, that we're illustrating right now. But if you were selling a whole collection or a series or doing this on a mass basis, you do have to be aware of these issues. And to discuss those a little bit, I'm going to turn it over to my partners, Byron McLean and Louis Lowe.
Right. So thank you, Andy. So as my colleagues were mentioning to you, there are many economic benefits and opportunities from offering and selling NFTs, but there's one huge issue that you have to look out for. And it's probably appropriate for me to talk about it as a former federal prosecutor here in Los Angeles who's prosecuted securities cases and is currently a member of Foley's JEDI group, Government Enforcement and Defense Investigations, as a white collar lawyer. You definitely have to be aware of the offering and selling of a particular NFT or collection of NFTs being construed as a security. The way in which that determination is made is based on a test that was construed back in 1946, the Howey test, before any of us even thought of the concept of offering and selling NFTs. And that test has four different elements. The first element is there an investment of money or some sort of consideration, which is pretty much always present. The second element is this investment of money in a common enterprise. Third, is it with the expectation of profit? And fourth, is it based on the efforts of others? And typically, when this test is being applied, the first two elements are typically present, and it's the last two that are often at issue. Now, if this digital asset or the NFT is construed to be an investment contract and thus a security based on this test, the implications of it being a security are significant and huge. One is that there can be registration requirements that you have to go through. Two, if those registration requirements do apply and you don't comply with them, there could be criminal and civil liability issues, significant issues. And third, the SEC really has an impact on whether or not something ends up being construed as an NFT and whether or not it can be sold to certain investors. Practically speaking, as Andy alluded to, if you're just selling, an individual artist just selling one NFT to another person, it's more than likely not going to be construed as the NFT being a security, as opposed to if you have a more sophisticated entity. So scale does matter in these transactions. But ultimately, it's the substance of the transaction as opposed to the form that the SEC really takes into consideration. I'll also note that, as we all know, there's not a lot of clarity in this realm right now. And Senator Pat Toomey on the Senate Banking Committee is going to be proposing some legislation to try to provide a little more clarity in this area in the near future. In fact, Foley is a co-sponsor of a nonprofit organization, the Global Digital Asset and Cryptocurrency Association, that's going to be proposing some recommendations to Senator Toomey and his committee to provide more clarity. In fact, Pat Doherty and I are co-chairs of that subcommittee on the security implications of digital assets. And we'll be providing those recommendations to his committee. I believe it's September 27th, later this month. So hopefully we'll have some more clarity once that congressional legislation comes out. But at this point, I'll turn it over to my colleague Louis to provide more practical implications of NFTs being construed as securities.
Hey, thank you, Byron. And I'm Louis Lowe. In the background here, you'll see that I'm in Silicon Valley, and I help companies get formed, financed, and scaled for growth. And the world that we live in has become this metaverse in the last 5 years, which became radically accelerated a year and a half ago when we all went virtual. So I'm in my home office, like probably most of you, and working with entrepreneurs who are coming up with all sorts of new business models on how to monetize the world they're living in, which we call a metaverse after Neil's book called Snow Crash. So when I begin working with an entrepreneur, one of the first questions that we ask is, what is our business? And the entrepreneurs that we're working with are typically partnering with creators of content, whether they're artists. Think of painters and the amazing work that they do that probably never gets seen unless you walk into that gallery in Soho. But now when we're living in this metaverse, those artists can access the global stage immediately, and how do they monetize that? And so some of the entrepreneurs that we work with are in fact content creators. Others are entrepreneurs that know content creators and know and understand the blockchain and want to bring that content to the blockchain. And so then the question is, is this new business going to be a business about creating content, or are they going to be creating a marketplace for the content to be exchanged, or are they really building the pipes of the blockchain? And so there's really this is a really important distinction, because it will come into play as to whether the NFT you're selling is in fact a security. And what Byron said is so important, is to structure these transactions in ways that allow for the NFT to be traded freely and without restriction. And if we fail that Howey test, then we do not have a viable business, whether you're inside or outside the United States. So Byron talked about one of those 4 prongs, and the one that I bump up against frequently is whether or not you're using the proceeds of the sale of the NFT to build some sort of a network or infrastructure, because if that's what you're doing, you're most likely going to fail the Howey test and be a security. And so we often work with entrepreneurs to make sure that their business model is not failing that test. You go beyond that, and the question then is, are you a money transmitter? If you're not a security, are you a money transmitter? And there's some good guidance out there that if you are clearly just a content creator and you're putting some content onto a platform that is registered as a money transmitter or is exempt from that regulation, then you can proceed. So really exciting business models are abounding in the metaverse, and we are here to help all of you bring this to fruition. Andy, before I pass it back to you, I'm seeing some awesome questions in the chat box on some of the ways that you create an NFT, and I'm going to turn it back over. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I noticed that while you were talking as well, and I wanted to mention to everyone, please do continue with the questions, and what we'll do is at the end, we should have a couple of minutes left to go through those and share some thoughts, and to the extent we can't, we'll follow up with the individual people who shared the question. So I'm about to turn it back over to Catherine, but I just want to show you now where we are in the process. We created the NFT, and as you can see here on the NFT page in my account, there are no offers yet. So as we turn it back over to Catherine, she's going to go ahead and illustrate the first offer.
Thanks, Andy. So I'm going to pop open our window here. And we're going to start in my account. You can see Andy's headshot here. That was a previous NFT we had minted. The first thing we'll typically do is, when you're making an offer on NFT, you need enough money to make that transaction happen. So as you know, OpenSea, like I mentioned before, they have a third party that helps them with the wallet aspect. We just want to make sure to check that there's enough funds in our wallet, and if there isn't, we can add funds to make sure that our transactions are going through. So I'm now on the listing page for the NFT that Andy just minted. As you can see, there's options to make an offer. A lot of the information that Andy had included in the minting, whether it's the tags, the terms of sale and description, the other types of description, these all stay with NFT, and these travel with NFT whenever you make a sale. And if the NFT is part of a collection, that is going to show here too, but in this case it's not. So going here, we're going to make an offer. It's pretty simple to do that. As you know, before I do that, from a general contract standpoint, there are, the offer is really the first step when you're forming a valid contract, and the three components are offer, consideration, and acceptance. And here we, as the buyer, are making the offer. This is, just note that this is generally the reverse of how these things work. A lot of times the seller will list the NFT for sale. So the offer for sale comes from the seller, and that could be accepted by the buyer unless the offer is first withdrawn. But since here the NFT is not being listed for sale, we as the buyer are the ones affirmatively making that first offer to Andy as the seller to purchase the NFT. So when you do make an offer, OpenSea will ask you to review the details of NFT. And this is, I think from their end, it's a confirmation step to make sure that the provenance of the NFT and the history of the NFT aligns with what you're expecting to receive. For this NFT, there's not been any sales, it was just created. This might not be that important, but if you're buying, a highly valuable or highly priced NFT as part of a collection, confirming this information is going to be probably more weighty. So we'll just have to go through, affirm that we've agreed to this, and then make an offer for the price that we want to pay. And here we're really making a nominal amount of consideration essentially for the NFT. We can set an expiration date for the offer, and we hit make an offer, and this is going to take us to MetaMask, because as you recall from our previous discussion, right, like OpenSea doesn't handle the transaction processing. It shoehorns that to MetaMask. So when we do make an offer, there's a transaction aspect to it, and this is handled by MetaMask. So here we're going to need to authorize the transaction on MetaMask for the wallet, and then our offer is submitted. And it does take a while to process in real time, but the end product is a successful submission of the offer. And if we and you can see here, once the offer is submitted, it'll show up in the profile of NFT as an offer that's been recorded. So before I hand it back to Andy, throughout that whole process, I want to drill down a little bit on the consideration piece. When you are, going through your wallet, you're making an offer for the sale of the NFT, there could be some regulatory considerations that apply. And money laundering issues, the funding of illegal activities, these are all things that can happen when you're making online digital payments, and it's been known to occur in the crypto space. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Brian to talk a little bit more about these considerations.
Yes, and just very, very briefly, as Catherine was mentioning, two things to kind of keep in mind, particularly if you are owning the exchange or the platform in which NFTs are being offered and sold on, is to keep in consideration KYC issues, which mean know your customer issues, and anti-money laundering issues. Typically, these type of issues will apply to banking businesses, but they could also apply to NFT exchanges. And it just means that, you have to do your due diligence, right? You have to know who your customers are. You need to know their identity to the extent you can, their past financial activities, any risks that they might impose. The platform or exchange that you have should be able to verify their identity, and you just want to do continuous monitoring of the customers on your platform. So have a process in place so that you can also adjust not just to the current requirements that are in place, but these requirements are always changing. So you want to be able to adjust to new requirements that might be put in place as well. But with that, I'll turn it back over to Andy.
Thanks, Byron. So I was trying to answer some of our chat questions here. We are now up to, so let's see, Catherine's made the offer. We need to get back into my account now to see, as we get into my account, you can see here that the offer now is showing up on the NFT page, right? There's the offer, shows who it came from. Catherine's account name is 95F28C. There's the amount of it. Gives me the option to accept it, which I will go ahead and do. And takes us to a similar screen to what you just saw. Now we're talking again about accepting it. You can see the fees here. OpenSea charges its fee. There's a royalty fee, and that's the charge that's going to come back to the creator for the royalties. Once again, as Catherine just illustrated, I will have to go into my MetaMask wallet to confirm this transaction, because that is how each of these transactions get represented on the blockchain. So here you can see, in accepting this, now we're at the point of a transaction where gas is going to have to be charged. So the gas fees, basically, as I discussed before, the way the blockchain works, it's a series of interrelated nodes and computers working to verify these transactions. All of that takes resources. And the way blockchain has sort of evolved, you've probably heard about Bitcoin mining and things like that. The operators of these nodes are verifying transactions, and as they do that, they're earning rewards in the sense of gas, meaning they're getting paid, in this case Ether, for doing the work of verifying these transactions. At this point right now, you can see the gas for this transaction, which is basically a 33-cent sale, is going to be about $110. That's based on the time of day and the amount of resources that are being used on the network at the given time. Actually, earlier in the day, it may have been more like several $100s. So you can ask OpenSea or your wallet to process transactions in different ways. You can say, I want it to happen as fast as possible, regardless of the gas price, or you can tell it to sort of do things slowly. And what happens then is the transaction will get prioritized in the blockchain in accordance with the level of priority that you've given it. The other thing that affects the amount of gas, besides the resources that are being used on the network at any given time, is the size of your contract. And by that, as you can see here, it's not a function of the size of the contract in terms of dollar amounts. It's more a function of the size of the contract in terms of the size of the actual program, the smart contract. So we went ahead and hit accept, accepting the gas. The processing is happening, which is the everything I just described about the blockchain validating this transaction. And it'll just take a couple of seconds here. And once it's done, that transaction has now been completed. There's a transaction hash, which if we click on it, it will show us a record of the transaction. You can see here, the status shows there are already 2 blocks mined since the confirmation of this transaction. So the blockchain is working. Once my transaction was done, other blocks get formed in front of it, and the transaction can't be changed. You can see here the contract is identified by the same hash address that we looked at before, and all the other details of this particular transaction are listed here in this history page. Now, we did just have a transaction that involved a purchase and sale using cryptocurrency. So there are ways in which this is something you need to think about. There is an asset here in the NFT that you're buying and selling, but there's also assets that you're using to do the buy and sell, the purchase and sale in the form of your cryptocurrency, which I'm going to ask Pat to talk about again. Before I do that, I just want to show you now, back on the NFT page, you can see it says it's now owned not by me, but by 95F28C, which is Catherine's account. And if you scroll down, you can see the price of the transaction there. There's no current offers, but if you scroll down to the history, you can see the entire history here from when I created it to the offer, the transfer, and the sale. So you can continue to track that with respect to the NFT itself. But Pat, if you want to talk a little bit more about the transaction from the crypto perspective, that would be great at this point.
Yeah, I will. Our partners out on the coast, Louis and Byron, have already talked about securities law issues and money service business issues, and those are important. Byron's going to help fix the law in this area, working with Senator Toomey, I believe, and Louis is helping his clients navigate the Metaverse, which is a big space. I'm going to discuss a topic that I think we all hate, which is paying the tax man. you buy goods and services with US dollars, that does not in itself lead to a tax payable. But if you pay with Ether or another crypto asset, it likely will, because the IRS does not treat crypto assets as currency. It treats it as property, like gold, like collectibles, like automobiles, like real estate. And so every time you close out a transaction in a crypto asset, which you will do if you use Ether, for example, to buy an NFT, that's closing out a transaction, you will have gain or loss on that transaction in that property, the property being Ether, and it'll be a capital gain or loss. It'll be either long-term or short-term, depending on how long you held the Ether. But that's a reportable transaction, and there will be tax consequences either way. And you will see from your tax returns as an individual that you need to report this as you would expect. In fact, you need to identify whether or not you even own crypto assets going forward, whether or not you've closed out transactions in them. If there's a loss, there's an opportunity here, because since it's property and not currency, you can repurchase the Ether on the rebound and lock in a gain from that, a loss on the sale and buying the NFT and a gain from the rebound and the purchase. I will tell you though that just yesterday the tax bill that was introduced included a provision to get rid of that. So this may be a short-lived benefit. We don't know yet. I'll just say be very mindful about this, the tax consequences of transacting in crypto assets, because there's a lot of enforcement growing in this area, and consult your tax lawyer or your tax accountant. Back to you, my friend.
Thanks, Pat.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Pat. I think, Catherine, we are up to the secondary market now. If you want to illustrate the next sale of the NFT that you just proudly purchased.
Yeah, sorry, just responding to some of the questions, great questions in the commentary here. Alrighty, so as Andy mentioned, now we're going to we cover the primary sale. Now we're going to cover a secondary sale of the NFT, which should be representative of all subsequent sales that would occur following the primary sale. So I have here, starting with the NFT now, which is in my profile or in my account, you'll notice, and I didn't scroll through it, but you'll notice that the terms, the description, everything Andy had placed in the minting process traveled with the NFT through that primary sale. So we're going to make another offer here, and this is from a third account to my account to purchase the NFT. And it's, starts off fairly similar to the primary sale. You have to confirm the details of the NFT, and you make an offer for an amount that you want to pay for this NFT. And we're obviously going to keep the dollar values small here. And you click on make the offer, and it'll take you again to MetaMask, where you need to authorize the transaction. And for this particular account, this is the first time we are making a transaction in crypto. So there's an additional layer of authorization here, where we are granting OpenSea specifically the right to withdraw cryptocurrency from the wallet. That only shows up during the first time that when you use your wallet. You don't need to do this authorization every single time. So we'll go ahead and make that authorization. And once we do, there's a bit of a time that you're waiting for this to register on the blockchain. And once it does, we can go ahead and authorize this transaction similar to how we did in the primary sale through MetaMask. So go ahead and authorize the transaction, and the offer you can see on the bottom here was submitted successfully. And once we do make that offer, we'll see here that there's been an offer made in the history. And if we scroll down further, we'll see that there's a trading history here showing every single offer that's been made, as well as sales and transfers since Andy first minted the NFT. And once we have the offer made, I'm going to switch now to a view of my account of the NFT. So we see here that the offer that was just submitted from the third account to purchase this NFT is now showing up in my account on the listing. So I can go ahead and accept this offer by clicking accept. And we'll see here, this is similar to the primary sales, a little bit different, because right now there's going to be a creator royalty going to Andy, who originally minted the NFT, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And there's also a fee that OpenSea is retaining as a marketplace fee. And my total earnings from this secondary sale, because we bid a slightly higher amount, is this marginal profit. And so we'll go ahead and accept the offer. And again, it takes us to MetaMask. Here we'll have to pay for gas because we are engaging in the sale of the NFT. So similar to how Andy previously talked about gas fees when he sold the NFT in the primary sale, again, we're having to pay gas fees here for the secondary sale. So we'll confirm the transaction. And once we do confirm the transaction, there's a bit of there was a bit of a wait time, and then we see a confirmation here that the NFT has been sold. And if you go to the account page of the NFT, you'll see that this is now owned by this third-party seller, or sorry, this third-party buyer in the secondary sale. Again, all the information, including the terms of sale, have traveled with the NFT through the secondary sale. And then this new sale is now recorded in this history information of the NFT. So as we know, stop my screen share. So as we can see from the secondary sale of the NFT does get transacted, and it has the potential to go from the primary sale to secondary sale kind of through, there's no limit on how many secondary sales it would go through. And ultimately, what we're selling, I think that is a very interesting question that a lot of folks have had concerns about, right? Because the content underlying the NFT is ultimately a copyright, and this is protected by US intellectual property laws. And when we're selling the NFT, this content is traveling with the NFT, and there are a lot of questions that arise as to how does the NFT relate to the underlying content, and what does that mean for implications, especially under intellectual property laws. So I'm going to pass it to my colleagues Andy and Laura to talk a little bit more about these issues. Andy, why don't we start with you first?
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, we were talking earlier, we mentioned copyright issues at various points throughout this discussion. And this circles back to one of the concepts we were talking about earlier, which is that, when you've bought an NFT, it incorporates artwork in it. You've bought that NFT. You haven't bought the underlying copyright to the artwork that is incorporated into that NFT. So there may be certain things you can do with it. Obviously, you're going to be able to look at it and use it for its intended purpose. But if you start getting into and you would have the ability to resell it, subject to any royalty restrictions. But in terms of trying to use the artwork for other purposes, you could end up in trouble with the original copyright holder. One of the questions we got in the chat here, which I already answered, but was a question about if I own a piece of physical artwork and I take a picture of it and then put it in an NFT, do I have a copyright problem there? And the answer is likely yes, because when you bought a piece of original physical artwork, you didn't buy the underlying copyright to it. Now, there are exceptions for things like fair use and public domain and all those sorts of things, but the basis of the question is putting it in an NFT and selling it is a commercial purpose. And so yes, those are the types of things, even though this has been a secondary sale, there could be a third, fourth, these things could end up getting sold and being out in the world for years. There are definitely issues like that you want to keep track of. Laura, are you able to unmute at this point? There you go.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yay! Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Andy. So all of those things are really important to keep in mind. And another thing that you want to think about, and it's something that Catherine alluded to earlier, is that in many cases, especially when music is involved, for example, you may you have to also see what exactly you're getting. In many cases, if there is some kind of music associated with the NFT, you have a very limited license for your own personal use. And it probably, depending on the terms, again, is not going to extend to commercial use. So one of the questions is, okay, well, if I own a bar, or if I want to if I'm an NFT collector, and I want to just display all of the NFTs and I want to play the music in a loop, you have to look into that to see if that's a public performance. So then there might be public performance licenses that are going to be required if you're going to be doing this commercially and you don't have a license to do it. So again, it's all going to be very important to make sure that you understand what you're getting, and also, what you intend to do with it afterwards. And briefly, I saw that somebody had a question about could there be a conflict between what the auto-generated smart contract says and what you put yourself as to the description. And yes, and this is actually cause lawsuits. I don't know if some of you joined a prior webinar that we did, we mentioned the Damon-Jay-Z lawsuit that was pending in New York. And that basically started because Damon Dash said that he was going to be doing an NFT where he was going to be selling his copyright to Jay-Z's debut album, Reasonable Doubt. And ultimately, there was a huge dispute over it because Damon Dash doesn't own the copyright to Reasonable Doubt. So that lawsuit's pending in New York. And so the answer to your question is yes. And that's why it's very important that your description matches what you're actually selling and getting. So back to you, Andy, so you can talk about the commissions and next steps.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. I will, before I get to that, I do want to give a shout out to one of our guests here who pointed out that he has already, I'm going to share this here, gone and made an offer on our NFT. So as you can see here, if we scroll down, there's a new offer here now, up to a whopping $101.58. The offer's here. This is in the account of one of our other colleagues, who's actually the head of IT for the firm. So I doubt he'll accept it, but anything's possible. So very quickly, to get back to what I think will be the final segment of this process, we got to get to the right window here. This will be just to show you now, these transactions have happened. We're back at my account, where you can see the Foley NFT. We're back in the collection that I created. If you click on this little hamburger icon here, it's going to take us to the royalties part of this collection. And you can see, once I've signed in with MetaMask, the two transactions that happened here and the royalty payout coming back to me. So the first sale and the second sale are both reflected here. OpenSea distributes the royalties, I think, on a monthly basis and only once they've reached a certain amount. But the point being, the royalties have been created and come back to me. And if Foley Lardner were to accept the offer that Brood, I think it is, just made on the NFT, then another royalty would come back to my account. This is a really important and significant part of the NFT sort of breakout here, as particularly in the creative world. And Laura, if you want to talk about the importance of that, I mean, from a contract perspective, the royalties are important. The royalty is baked into the metadata of this NFT, so it's always going to be there, and it's always going to get paid back on any secondary sale, which I think is something important to talk about. And Laura, you've been dealing with this a lot, so why don't you address it?
Yeah, so and it's apt that Larry was the one that did this offer because I think that this has huge implications for creatives, especially in the music industry. And this is really the area of, everybody gets the big headlines about the $69 million painting, but what I think gets a little bit lost is what it really is going to do for artists and creatives. Because yeah, that $69 million painting, under a normal scenario, that would be the only amount that an artist would get. Now, that's a great amount, and the person could people could live off his life forever. But in this context, there is this recurring royalty. So it's really a way for artists to be able to continue to monetize the value of their work. And this is what I think is going to be a real disruptor in the music industry and in other industries. Also, the fact that you can trace things. There have been so many unclaimed royalties because houses cannot find the correct publishers, or they don't know who the songwriters are anymore. So it's really going to be a wonderful way, I think, to use the blockchain to trace things so that artists do get their dues. And so I think this is really just the beginning of the technology and the capability that it has to disrupt businesses like the music industry. So we're only at the beginning of it, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So back to you, Andy.
Laura, oops, thank you, Laura. So that is really the end of the process of the minting, sale, and resale of the NFT. I'm putting it back up here for a second, and I know we're at our time. So obviously people are going to have to jump, but I'm happy to try to answer a couple of more. We've answered some of the questions in the chat. I don't know if any of our partners here have any of these particular questions they want to address, but I'll try scrolling through them for the ones we haven't answered yet. One question from Rob is about different blockchains. Are there differences between these blockchains from a legal perspective? Obviously, depending on how you interact with them, there probably are in terms of your wallets. I'm not sure if Catherine or Pat have anything specific to say about that.
I would say the reliability of the blockchain is something to take into consideration, because if you're relying on the blockchain, right, as a backbone or some sort of framework for certain types of transactions, in some cases you'll be making either implied or express warranties to whoever you're transacting with about availability, about certain assurances. So to the extent that the blockchain fails or there's some sort of mess up, essentially, unlikely as it is, but really, depends. That could put you at legal liability to various stakeholders that you might have engaged with.
Thanks, Catherine. I do have a question here from an unnamed guest. Two questions, actually. Is this one NFT or the sale of copies of the NFT to multiple buyers? We were just doing one NFT. The next question, and I would like to address this, the question was whether I was saying the terms of the auto-generated smart contract may conflict with the terms that are user-generated around the terms of sale. I guess what I was getting at is, whether it's in your description of the NFT or in your marketing of the NFT or your sale, if what you're saying to the public and to the consumers does not accurately represent what you're actually selling, then you could be subjecting yourself to legal liability. And that's true in the case of NFTs. It's also true in the case of, tickets to a sports game or anything else that you might be selling online or otherwise. It applies in regular advertising, print advertising. This is an area of law that's been around for a long time, but it is not going away because it's an area that, in particular, class action lawyers love to jump on to bring lawsuits. Let's see, anything else? I don't know if Catherine, anything else you want to address here, or should we turn it back over to John? I think we've answered some of these questions in box already. Tony had some questions about agent and employees. I think that relates to something you were talking about, Catherine.
Let me find it.
Was it 212?
212. Okay. Agent and issuer compared to employee. So to answer this question at high level, employees are deemed to be agents of their employer. So they're agents in that sense. So if the issuer of an NFT is an employee of a larger organization, if that employee is acting within the scope of their employment, typically they would be deemed an agent of that organization. So, it's always going to be an individual, transacting these transactions, but in some cases they'll be deemed an agent of the organization. So for example, when Coca-Cola is listing their NFT, they're having one of their employees do it, but that employee is doing it on behalf of Coca-Cola, or it could be a contractor, but in either case it's an agent. And let's see.
I'll take the next part of that. Okay. The next question was, is the ultimate contract the bytecode itself or the English language source code interpretation via an internet tool? Because Andy mentioned that the smart contracts get audited by whom, or is it software? So, there's not an easy answer to that question, Tony. In the case of this particular transaction we just did, right, the smart contract represents the transaction itself. It's less of a contract in the way that we think of a legal contract, because there's nothing other than what was listed in the description terms. There's really nothing else that has to be done or that has to happen for the transaction. So the English language part of it is going to be relevant if the buyer of this NFT were to go out and try to use it in a way that contradicts what the limitations we put in the description. That's going to be a breach of contract case based on the English language description that we used in the posting of the NFT. In some instances, the smart contract itself is going to have future performance for things that it has to do. Remember, the smart contract is a computer program. So there may be situations where it's a combination of the two. Smart contract is probably really not the best phrase. In fact, the guy who originally coined the phrase, Nick Szabo, who is one of sort of the godfathers of blockchain, has been quoted as saying that he wished he didn't use that phrase because it's confusing. It's a contract in the terms of affecting a transaction, but less so in the terms of a legal agreement as we would think about it.
Okay. And do you think we have time for one more, Andy, or should we end the webinar?
I think we're over now. Why don't we go ahead and I don't know if John wants to sum up, but we can respond to the people here who have registered and answer some of these questions, which we'll do as soon as we can.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Andy. I think we'll let everyone go. We'll take a look at the chat box and we'll follow up with you individually to answer some of your questions. Look, I just wanted to close out here and thank all of you for joining us. Thanks also to Larry for showing some love to our new NFT. Appreciate that. And look, a special thank you to my NFT Task Force colleagues for their efforts today and insights. Really interesting stuff, and especially to Catherine and Andy for pulling this thing together and getting our NFT launched. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank our Foley marketing and tech personnel who help us pull all of this together. Just so you know, this presentation will be available for viewing soon. It'll be on our NFT Task Force page, and we will send out a link and a notice to you all when that goes up. And before you go, I do just want to put a plug in for our next plan program, which is going to be led by Laura Ganoza down in Miami, who you met here today. And that one's going to have a little bit of a different take. Laura leads the fashion, apparel, and beauty industry team. So we're going to take a sort of narrow focus on how NFTs are affecting that space in the commercial world. But we'll have more details. That's coming together. And when we have more details and an invite, we'll certainly have it out there. So look, if you have any other questions, please feel free to follow up with any of us. in the group here, and we'll do our best to respond to those questions that have been posed throughout the program. And in the meantime, thanks again for being here, and we look forward to seeing y'all again real soon. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.